Hey guys, Languagehacker here with a guide for you. This time we're going to talk about Control Warrior. This is a bit harder to explain in 5 minutes because it's a very complex deck and decisions. There's a lot of micro decisions you make over the course of the game, but I'll try to kind of lay out what the important ones are for you. Now, what is Control Warrior? Control Warrior is a deck that uses a lot of defensive removal tools and eventually wins the game off the back of a couple of very high value or very impactful cards. And some of these impactful cards include stuff like Cthulhu, a Silas Soulbound Ashtongue combo where you swap the Soulbound Ashtongue to their side of the board to see one of their minions, and then even maybe Shield Slam it to do an OTK in theory against some slower matchups. Mutinous is not really win condition, but against some decks it can be. Against OTK DH, that's probably the only way you beat it relatively consistently with this deck, by eating their Il'gynoth. But the big hitters are Cthulhu and Silas. There's some other stuff that you can do to win you the game, just on tempo or removal, removing all of your opponent's threats. But the big game closers are Cthulhu and Silas. And if you don't run these, you can get grinded out by decks. If they realize that you're not running these big hitters, they could probably just use the resources more defensively and kind of just grind you out of the game, which is not what you want. So you do need some of these just to guarantee inevitability to some point. Now, let's talk about some of the removal tools. We got stuff like Minefield, pretty cheap spread removal. We have Blade Storm, can be used as AoE and can be used as single target removal, very good. Coerce, kind of like Execute, but you can also use it on undamaged minions, including your own ones. If you ever need to do something like Coerce your own Barov or Coerce a Kargath to get that in the deck, stuff like that. Coerce the Kresh if you need the weapon. Shield Slams, which has been in Control Warrior forever. We got Rancor, which is new with the Baron's expansion. This deals 2 damage to all minions, and you gain 2 armor for each destroyed. Hard to use effectively in some matchups, but it's very good against stuff like Miracle Rogue, Face Hunter. Sometimes you can use it against Mage, depending on what kind of minions they get from Font of Power or from a Pexus Blast. But importantly, it can also be used with Barov. Barov sets everything, all the health of the minions to 1, and then you Rancor. So Barov Rancor is almost insta board clear and gain a bunch of armor. And that's something you might want to hold on to in some matchups. When you have those two together, you can be a bit greedier with your removal and kind of hold back a bit until you get enough value out of it. We have a couple of weapons. The deck does not have that much card draw, so it's important to have these weapons in there because it lets you cycle through your deck. Bit of armor gain with Shield Maiden, Armor Vendor, Stage Dive. Only 1 rush minion, Kargath, but Kargath is pretty good. It's good just for tempo early, remove a threat, but also very important to have some extra armor later on in the game. Brawls, that's not super new either, and Scorpid for some extra flexibility. We run 3 weapons, 2 axes, and a Bulwark. Bulwark is actually very, very useful in delaying the game. You can use it at the near the end of a Miracle Rogue game, for example, to stop their Alex Shadow Step Tenmu stuff until they hit you in the face 4 times with Dagger. And that may seem like that's kind of trivial, but you can actually apply some counter pressure, especially if they're fatiguing with the Bulwark. But it doesn't even have to be used in late game situations. You can just use it when you don't have removal in hand and you need to buy a turn or 2 in the mid game. We've pretty much gone over every card here, so let's talk about how you actually play this deck. Most games are a balance of how much you want to remove your opponent's stuff versus how much you want to hold removal. And what I mean by that is, ideally, you want your opponent to run out of cards before you do. When your opponent runs out of cards, you just win by hitting the button and tanking up, and then they can't kill you. A lot of the decks in the meta, Miracle Rogue, Aggro Shaman, even Spell Mage, they win by killing you. They don't win by having overwhelming value. So if you can just remove all of their stuff and stay alive, you win the game. So you want to find out how you can use your removal optimally, or as close to optimally as possible, to remove your opponent's threats and not die, which means evaluating your life total at different points in the game and realizing when you can be a bit greedy and say something like, my opponent only has a Cult Neophyte on the board, maybe I save this Rancor for when they develop a bit more. I'm not too scared of a 3-2 hitting me over time, but if I use a Rancor and a 3-2 and then they start going wide on the board, it becomes a bit of a problem. Now, that changes drastically when you're at 5 health. If you're at 5 health and they have a Neophyte on the board, you're pretty fucking scared of that Neophyte. So, a lot of this deck requires evaluating the board state, your hand, and understanding when you can use these resources. And there's no quick tip for telling you when you need to do that. It's just you have to play the deck and experience it and understand, oh, maybe brawling two 1/1s wasn't very useful. Maybe I should have saved Brawl for the N'Zoth that I knew they had. And I'm using some exaggerated examples here just to give you the extremes so you understand what I'm trying to get at. That's really all it comes down to. It's understanding how the deck functions with itself, when you need armor to set up for shield slam stuff, when you need to armor to get out of range of specific damage combos, for example, Miracle Rogue's burn situation, when you need to remove stuff to keep the board smaller, when you need to do everything, basically. The decisions outside of the game, I can help you with a little bit, though. And what these decisions are is what kind of late game cards you want. What kind of package do you want in this deck? This is my kind of standard list right now. And this may be very different from what you see other people run in terms of 3 or 4 cards difference. I think most decks will be pretty similar to this on ladder. But this is my standard. I'm facing just a bunch of random stuff. This is kind of what I want to bring to the table. Cthulhu, Silas tend to be better against slower matchups. Mainly Priest in the Mirror. Warlocks, we don't talk about Warlock. This loses to Warlock. Don't worry about beating Warlock. You can sometimes beat Warlock with Silas Soulbound, Shield Slam. But this gives you enough late game stuff to beat most of the decks on ladder. But you will start losing to Greedy Priest that runs stuff like South Sea Scoundrel. So I have 2 other lists for you guys. This is the Tempo Tank Up, which cuts Silas and Soulbound Ashtongue. It cuts the 2 Shield Maidens, and we start adding in some more tempo-heavy tools. Anchorman, Scrap Golem, Sourfang, and N'Zoth. This, if you're not facing a lot of priests, is very, very nice because you start playing more with minions, and then you actually win with boards like Sourfang and N'Zoth, and that actually lets you win on tempo, which Control Warrior can't always do, but this gives you a way to do it. With the addition of Kresh, Overlord Sourfang summoning the Frenzy minions ends up being a pretty acceptable win condition. Pretty good push for tempo. Most of the other control tools are the same though. So against tempo, we cut some of the greedy stuff, Silas Soulbound, and we put in some more tempo heavy tools. Makes sense. Now, if you're facing a lot of priests, what you can do is cut the 2 minefields. You can add in 2 scoundrels, and you still want the Silas Soulbound. Against priests, you just want as much stuff as possible. And if they're running scoundrels, you start fatiguing faster, which is a problem. So you can start fatiguing them back with the scoundrels. This also gives you access to more of their tools, either removal or generation. You just want more stuff against priests. So if you're facing mostly priests, I would run a list that looks kind of like this. So that's the guide. Manage your resources, play the game, and figure out when you need to be holding and using removal. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and let me know what other guides you'd like. If you have suggestions for what I could be doing differently in these videos, by all means, let me know in the comments below. See you next time.